You're out of here. Good morning, everybody. This is the DRC meeting for the Diener School. I am Christina Sorrento, and I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and your lead reviewer is Saquon Gatlin. The purpose of this meeting really is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received last week. I'm going to ask Saquon just to highlight any of the major issues we should talk about, and then really turn it over to you for your meeting. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. Go right ahead, Saquon.
All right, thank you, everyone. Saquon Gatlin here, your lead reviewer for the Diener School Preliminary Plan. Just to lay out some key comments here in general. There were some scheduling concerns just to make sure we have everything in line with the conditional use, which I can discuss near the end of the meeting when we get to schedule and resubmittal dates and all that. Another general comment was just we need to pursue abandonment of the special exception for the existing use on site. And then getting into some of the planning comments, there were comments regarding the potential phasing and what that may entail and how we can come to agreement to work with that constraint you guys have. There were also some transportation planning comments regarding the master plan green corridor and pedestrian safety, as well as ADA compliance and pedestrian level comfort concerns relating to cost estimates and things of that nature. We also had some comments regarding showing street lamps on the site right of way. And environmentally, there were comments for clarification and information regarding landscape plans and forest conservation plans. And then from outside agencies, we had comments from DOT regarding queuing, regarding congestion, and just making sure we study those as well. There were also SHA comments regarding bike lanes and storm drain connections. And that's a general overview, but we can get into those details as we discuss here today. I'd like to open up to you guys.
Okay. First, Saquon, I want to thank you for putting together that list of, like the key comments, because that was super helpful for us. Lots of the comments are things that are requests that the applicant can say yes to, and we won't have a problem. I think that clarifying the landscaping and environmental stuff is a category we don't need to talk about today, because I think that'll all work itself out. I wanted to give you a little background about the school's process, and to help so that everybody understands the importance of timing in this situation. This school is in rented space, and they have that space through this school year and next school year, and they need to be in their new space for the school year that starts in the fall of 24. So it's a tight little piece of time to be able to get all the approvals and get the interior renovation done, and be able to use the site. And there is also a financial constraint. They are at the beginning of a capital campaign to raise the money for this project. And the reason that we've presented a phase 1 and a phase 2 is because they don't anticipate having the funds to do phase 2 for some time. Certainly not in time for a fall of 24 occupancy of the property. And so that is the entire reason that we will be talking about what do we really have to do in phase 1. It's just a practicality. If the conditions of approval end up requiring things in phase 1 that they don't have the money to do, and they don't feel they're going to, they're not going to be able to implement. It's just it's not a profit loss calculation. It's just a practical cash flow. Will they be able to have the money to do it? So the approach that we took in order to work with all these limitations is to do as little as possible to the site in phase 1. Focus the effort on the interior renovation, which is a big piece of work. It's gutting the interior and completely transforming the space. So we were trying to do as little as possible outside. And that's why you've seen that we don't have things like a walkway up from the sidewalk. Because of the topography, there's a big slope up from the sidewalk towards the existing building. And obviously, that's a big constraint when you're working with an existing building. You don't get to choose where it's located. if we start doing things in that front part, like the walkway that was suggested, it ends up triggering more changes in order to be able to fit that in to make it work with the grade. And it could end up being the thing that tips it over from feasible to not feasible. So we wanted to talk about that idea of the pathway up and whether that could be postponed to phase 2. I also want to talk about whether there's an expectation of making that ADA accessible. Because if there is, that's another at least $250,000 just on the physical stuff, not even the soft costs. Because you have 225 feet of ramp in order to make it up that grade. And that's also 225 feet of ramp that someone with a mobility issue or in a wheelchair has to navigate. So we think it's really impractical to have to do an ADA accessible entrance from the sidewalk. Even in phase 1, our plan has full ADA accessibility for somebody who arrives in a vehicle. You know, they can park in handicapped accessible spaces. There's a handicapped accessible route into the building. It's just getting up that, is it 16 feet of grade, I think, it's really hard. It's really hard. I mean, you know, Josh, we didn't do introductions, did we? I'm Françoise Carrier, Land Use Council.
Katie Wagner with Grove Slade.
Josh Andrew, Lord Sergeant Architect.
Bob Newman, James O. Partners.
So Josh, we've had some discussions with Josh about how you would do you know, this major switchback to try and do that. And none of the options are pretty, I'll tell you. It's really, it takes up, you know, sort of at least half of the frontage of the building to do it. And as you view it from the street, you'll be looking at one after another of these ramps, which of course have to have railings and retaining walls. So from an urban design standpoint, it's really unattractive. And then from a practicality standpoint, you know, is it just too hard to use and that nobody's actually going to use it?
Isn't that a building code issue? If you're renovating a building, you got to make it accessible. I mean, that's just a national law, isn't it?
Okay. Well, we have an ADA consultant who is, you know, working on those issues. Did you guys get any feedback from that person?
Nothing more specific. I think what I would say is that renovating the building is ADA accessible, will be as a part of the overall renovation. And like Francois mentioned, like from being able to, you know, park on the property and get into it. This is this kind of odd condition between like just a significant grade change from a right of way to get there. So I would say the building itself is accessible. It is literally this kind of, if you're on the sidewalk getting to the front door scenario.
I mean, that might be just a permitting issue that was almost outside of our jurisdiction, that specific issue. So you just better make sure.
Is there somebody from DPS on the line?
There are many people. Let me see who might be.
Is there anybody from DPS
Well,
who might? Pat, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, just to Paul's point, I mean, I think that's been sort of what we've been talking about internally is like that this issue is more likely to maybe creep up during permitting than sort of this planning process. So as was mentioned, we are talking with some code consultants to see, you know, given the unique constraints, what is or isn't required. And there are proportionality measures in ADA in terms of alterations and additions, but we're still exploring all of that.
Melissa, do you have anything to add to that?
I'm sorry, I think I missed what the question was for zoning. What was that?
It's an 88 question, and I didn't know whether you would have
Oh,
some.
no, you know who it is? It's the commercial team. It's in the commercial building code. So if it's a ADA question, you would probably want to reach out to Crystal Roberts and get connected with her team to ensure that you're meeting those requirements.
Francois, I would think if it is a requirement, then we can talk about when that would be appropriate to put in. And then kind of loop that into whatever kind of phasing you have, but let's get the answer first as to whether or not it's required. I mean, I would think you'd want it from a purely from an ADA accessibility standpoint, not just people dropping off, but from the street. And to Paul's point, that may be a requirement that we just don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of wanting it, of course, it's a nice thing to have, and there is, this is a school that serves a population that sometimes includes people who have mobility issues.
Sure.
The likelihood of any of them arriving on foot or, not in a vehicle seems extremely remote,
It just takes one person to arrive there by
I
wheelchair, and then you have a problem.
suppose that's right.
This is a T-Ken Cherry from DPS. Not to confuse anybody, but it's a commercial building requirement that you need to consult with them. However, as far as the right-of-way is concerned, please make sure that there's a positive drainage. The water from the right-of-way does not go into the building. I'm sure Patrick already knows about that. So make sure that it's a positive drainage. It does not impact the building, and there's no grade separation between the building and the right-of-way, and it's accessible. Everything needs to be within the private property, not in the right-of-way, as far as like the ramp is concerned. If you have provided ramp, it has to be within the private property. The door swing, things like that, that needs to be within the frame of the parameter of the private property, not in the right-of-way.
Yeah, and then everything we've explored has been on site and not only out of the right of way, but out of the PUE that we're proposing as well. So.
Okay.
Looking at the screen reminds me that we have two important people from Diener who are participating virtually. Can I ask you to introduce yourselves, please?
Sure. I'm Kathy Chumis. I'm the head of school here at Diener.
Oh, and I guess I was looking at Elizabeth above.
Oh, sorry, Elizabeth Wilcox.
Okay, she's Elizabeth Wilcox, land planner, who's also working with us. Not the best sound. My glasses are not good enough for me to have.
Laurie's on
exactly
there
who that
too.
was.
Laurie Aronson.
I thought Lori might be, but I didn't see her. Anyway, just so you know that folks from the school are here.
Lori's on, but she's muted. Lori's on.
Totally. Oh, that's right. There's Lori. She's totally invested. They're really, this is a really big deal for them, for the life of the school.
Francois, just so you know, Melissa put an updated, it's Crystal Maddox. She put it in the chat, all the contact information.
Yeah, I heard her say Roberts and I thought, did she change it?
Yeah, she said she misspoke.
Okay. All right, so can we talk about the walkway in, and I guess also some of the design, the sketches that we got? They seem to, they make some pretty dramatic changes to the front of the site, which make it not so much space that Diener can use as space that's sort of dedicated to the public. So we would like to explore kind of what the motivations are there.
Are the parking spaces that you're showing in this drawing, that's just existing today?
No. Josh?
Yeah, what's currently on the screen is the phase 2 scenario. And I think that's part of the issue right now is that between like what Francois described of the initial notion was that we were trying to limit the amount of work we did on phase 1. There's a fair amount of difference between phase 1 and phase 2 in terms of where that, at least what we've shown in terms of where the drive aisle is and that kind of thing.
So that in the phase 1 that you show, is that just basically the way it is there today?
That is it. Would I be able to share my screen?
Sure, if you join the meeting, but mute your computer. Okay.
Okay. If I could do that real quick, then I've got a few.
While you're pulling that up, we in the conditional use package, we included a phase 1 drawing. We did not include that in the preliminary plan, thinking the preliminary plan was just kind of showing the full build out of the campus, but we can certainly add that to the preliminary plan set and we can bring it up and if needed.
This is a tool I'm calling in for this. I helped the Don County team prepare some of the sketches. So, some of our motivation for sharing those options were a few. Number one was to make sure that the school really had a civic presence on this major street, as is befitting of an educational institution. In looking at the phase 1 and the phase 2 drawings, I think it was just noted in the comments that there was a lot of changes that were being proposed in the front of the school. And so some of the sketches we were proposing were, illustrating some ways in which that change can be more incremental and not be so much of a, you build one thing and then you come back and then you replace it. So, where the loop is currently, as can be seen on the image on the right here, I think you all are showing some bus drop-off spaces in phase 1. And we think that's okay because you have secured gates towards the back of the property where some of the car parking spaces are. But we were simply suggesting that maybe those bus drop-off spaces can be more like parallel drop-off spaces as opposed to these sort of head in or back in drop-off spaces as was being shown on the phase 1 drawing. This would limit the amount of pavement that you would need. We also, in looking at the drawings, noted that immediate drop-off loop is not a part of the area that you need for fire access. So the turning radiuses and things like that, and the pavement there can be quite narrow and tighter. And by doing that, it opens up some opportunities to consider what happens in the front of the school in phase 1. And if the loop remains in the same place between phase 1 and phase 2, we thought there might be some actual savings in those improvements, and that you don't have to build one thing in phase 1 and then come back and build another thing in phase 2. So those were some of our rationale behind proposing those sketches. We also think that a school like this could use some more outdoor space for kids. Some of that front space, even though it's beyond the secured gates, with supervision of teachers and assistants, it could be used for outdoor space, for outdoor classrooms, sensory gardens, etc. So that's where I think we were coming from when we proposed those sketches. I just wanted to share those comments before we go further into discussion.
Thanks, Atul. That is very helpful. Maybe it'd be helpful if Josh were to talk a little bit about phase 1 versus phase 2. Atul, what you're seeing on the phase 1 is not stuff that we would be creating. It's mostly stuff that's there. So it's not a question of building one thing and then tearing it down for phase 2.
That's where I was trying to get to.
Do you have a plan view of that?
Yeah.
I do, yeah. So here's a plan view of phase 1. Again, thank you for that explanation. That's very, very helpful. Yeah, as Francois mentioned, I think that really the notion was to try to limit what we did in this first phase for the site. And totally agree. I don't think we want to do something and undo it. And to be honest with you, when we've looked at the ADA access from a ramp standpoint, in this current scenario, we have a real challenge of doing a ramping and then it being in the way of what we planned for the phase 2. We've spoken, let me go to the phase 2.
Remind me what the enrollment is that you have for phase 1.
Well, currently there are
You split it,
72
right?
students, and then the maximum that we're using for traffic purposes is 120.
Okay.
The maximum the
so-
school actually expects is 100.
Is there a existing conditions aerial, I think, that could be pulled up? Because this is, I think, the image shows a lot more parking in the front than what is being shown on the drawing. And I think you're maybe adjusting some things, maybe not all things, and it'll be helpful to see that.
That's right. Maybe you can see right here. Yeah, that's right. Several of the improvements that we were including as part of phase 1 in the right of way was what was being shown. So we were trying to do what was required as a part of that to meet the criteria for the county, but then not going beyond that for this additional phase.
Taking out the lower.
Yeah, in order to put in that side path you see there, effectively, we need to grade back and eliminate that first row of parking that's there today. So that's why that all disappears. It's all grading and so forth to accommodate the frontage improvements.
Right. And so our only comment on this phase 1 condition would be that do we really need those parking spaces that you are leaving in the front? And could the buses simply use that loop to drop off people? Or cars could use that loop to drop off people in a more of a parallel parking situation. So most of the parking, even in phase one, kind of is really limited to the back of the school.
I'm told those are not intended to be bus spaces.
Okay,
Those are spaces for visitors.
right.
The
So
buses aren't going to drop off in the same loop with everybody else, right, Kate?
No, the buses will use that front loop,
Oh, right.
for
Yeah.
drop off, and part of the reason is really to just, facilitate queuing. So we understand that we're on Old Georgetown and we can't have queuing on Old Georgetown. So it's to have those two areas of drop off, one separating the buses and one separating the
Right.
vehicles.
and that's so you're suggesting that the cars would park in the angled spaces and the buses would drop off in a parallel configuration, or?
Yes, and the buses are not stored on campus.
Right.
So they drop off and then leave.
Okay.
One other point I would make, so this is phase one. Your excellent point about not having a lot of real estate for outdoor space. I mean, that's a major concern for the school. And so that's where you'll note where we've tried to go ahead and grab some space around where the, where the existing parking lot is and trying to create some additional kind of playground space and that kind of thing. Here is where our conversations have gone in terms of, if I look at phase two that we're showing here, was that there was a lot of concern around, and you sort of noted that a bit when you were discussing kind of outdoor space, the space that can be secured, that teachers can and parents can feel comfortable with the students being somewhere. And so this is an interesting property because really, you come in at the entry level to this building is at the mid floor. So this, the entry to this building is at that center floor level. So right now, what we have is the outdoor play area, even in phase one and then in phase two, it's all starting from that elevation and moving on from there from be able to sort of deal with from a security standpoint. So what this was showing here, Atul, was sort of looking at the notion of this having this raised zone that's roughly at the same elevation as the entry floor, maybe a little bit lower because we got some ramp to get in there, but that this could be contained so that you could have teachers out there watching, but they're closer to the building. There's no interaction with potential traffic. You're not having to go across a drive aisle or be close to a busy street. And so that's what the strategy was there, to be able to provide as much real estate, and there's not a lot, right? Provide as much real estate as possible of outdoor space that could be accomplished. And so if, in way I was understanding that, when this kind of green area, and I'll zoom in a little bit more, if this area starts to move out into this zone more, I think it's going to be where the school's probably just not going to use it because they've got to go across a drive aisle that is still in the public realm, right? Versus what's in the kind of private realm of the school that they can contain. So that's one of the things that we've been trying to look at relative to thinking about the phase.
I think if you take it up a level higher, get out of the detail of it all.
Uh-huh.
What we're trying to say here is in the CR zone, we do not want a parking lot facing the street in the CR zone. So right here, you're having a parking lot face onto the street. And so, I think that the diagrams that we showed had parking sort of off to the side in the drawing. And so, so the parking would be sort of on the side rather than in the front, facing the street. So that's kind of the big overarching comment. And then if you get down into the detail, the idea was if you have a drive-through, because we're assuming you're going to have enough parking everywhere else, if you put it to the sides.
That may not be a correct assumption. But
Well, I think the number of spaces that you are showing in your phase two, I mean, we suggest you could probably find other locations for that parking. So if you take those assumptions, then the idea is that this plaza, this drive-through drop-off for the bus plaza, potentially then could be something, in after hours. It could be used after bus drop-off. It could be closed off. It could be a plaza that could be contained. It could be, a space that multi-use, not just for buses, but for something else. So that was kind of the idea. And I think, even if you're talking about that lower, again, going to your ramp, topic, that's gonna be a big problem, I would think.
And,
Lower.
and
Just one point of clarification, the property is actually zoned R60. It's not CR. That's where we have the conditional use for this one.
no, thank you for that. And I think even in this drawing, again, we are trying to find solutions that, achieve what we are hoping to get, which is a school which has a really nice presence on a major street, and also accommodate the very specific needs of this type of a use. So in this drawing, for example, if you all wanted to explore some thoughts that shift the driveway closer to the street and maximize the space towards the school, but then take the idea of parking in the manner we are showing, as opposed to what you were showing, where the parking gets aligned on the sides, I think that could be a win-win situation where you could get a little bit more parking. The parking is on the sides, the driveway is closer to the street, but then there's more space in front of the school that really starts to make that an attractive proposition for the students and the teachers. And in doing so, creates a really nice relationship between the frontage of the school and Old Georgetown Road. So I think there are good ideas in what you had proposed. There might be some reasonable thoughts in what we are sharing, and if we can sort of combine the best of all these thoughts and solve the problem, that's really what we are hoping to get to as an outcome.
Well, it sounds like this will be a good topic for a meeting next week.
Yeah.
So we'd like to request one. I have one quick question that I want to make sure to ask before we leave today, which is there was one comment about a street light.
Yeah, it's
And
me.
we're assuming that's adding a Cobra light head to an existing pole.
I
Is
think-
that correct? Or is it?
Katie and I can also chat about this more. It may be something that I misunderstood with the TIS. So I think, so we have standards for spacing of street lamps, and it looks like we have a deficient spacing where it's too
Right.
far apart, and so it would land on the site. And this is one of those weird things with the LATR where we're finding this through an off-site review. However, if the place where it needs to land is on site, it doesn't count as an off-site mitigation, and it's something you need to do. So we can figure that out, and I think that's a conversation with Katie and Pat to figure out how that goes in there. But unfortunately, you don't get to count that towards the proportionality guide.
No, I wasn't asking. It was just, I was just wondering, we thought that there was an existing pole.
If there's an existing pole and that works, fantastic. But if there isn't, then we've got to install one where there isn't one.
Yeah, I think we'll work that out. I think it's on the pole, or we can put it on the pole.
Great,
So
that
hopefully.
would be great.
Okay.
Real quick, just in advance of our meeting next week, I just show you this real quick. This is not a design per se, but this is just showing quantity of ramping.
Yeah.
Just for
Understood how this site presents is very important. Also, as a green corridor, which Old Georgetown Road is, how we want to frame that and accentuate with planting areas and trees is very important. So we'll give some thought to this and come to the meeting next week with those constraints in mind.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody have anything else they want to raise today? Folks participating virtually?
Nope.
Okay.
Is it
Staff,
just-
anything you want to?
Is it just design then for next week?
I think maybe transportation too. Because we didn't touch on transportation today, and we know, I mean,
We're waiting for the rest of the SAJ comments, and so I
Right.
think
right,
And frontage improvements kind of overlaps that design transportation.
exactly. So we do need to talk about the frontage improvements and exactly what, what's really the minimum that we can do in phase one to try and help this school actually get a new home. You guys, I'm sure, have encountered this private school phenomenon before. It's really tough for the small schools. I guess it's not that easy for big schools, but for small schools with a small budget, it's really hard.
Well, I think from our perspective, Pat, one of the, Pat, not Francois, I was looking at Patrick, I'm sorry.
It's okay, you look a lot alike.
Yes, I'm so sorry. We are looking at, what the conditional use requirements are to get you through that process. And then what triggers there are at subdivision to make sure that whatever the requirements are, that we have that ability to make sure that those go in. So, I mean, give some thought to that. We're definitely giving some thought to what those triggers might be and kind of what we can do and maybe what we physically can't do, or we can tie to specific, conditions or TMAG or whatever that might be. So
Yeah.
give it some thought. We're definitely putting some thought into that as well as to what that looks like.
Yeah, and before we leave, Quasi is actually on with SHA, so if there is something that you would like to discuss with State Highway now.
I did have, I had one quick question, if that's okay. Quasi, I saw in your comments you did provide, there was a mention, and thank you for that, that if we're just simply doing the frontage improvements, leaving the curb cuts, that this could be done under a district permit as opposed to an access permit. I think there has been some desire to maybe see those curb cuts get shrunken up to the maximum extent feasible. I'm not sure if we're there yet, but if we do shrink those up, I just was curious if does that trigger us into access permit, or would that still be, existing curb cut just slightly modified? Would that still be a district permit?
Yeah, it would be an access permit once you modify the access. And I agree. I agree that it should be narrowed if it's going to be one way. But yeah, it would be an access permit.
Thank you.
Yeah, to build on what Katie said, we've been coordinating with SHA and MCDOT about the TIS review. I know we've got some dangling chads there with some comments, but we are very, very motivated to try to get everybody what they need so that we can move in a forward direction.
And we appreciate that motivation. Anything you want to ask Quasi today?
No, I think we're just waiting for the rest of the comments and we'll.
Yeah, it sounds like Scott's getting up to you by the end of the week.
Yes, and then we're just waiting for
great.
District 3's
Very
comments.
nice.
Quasi, do you know when those comments will be in?
No, not. I'm hoping this week.
Okay.
I know Scott is going to try to get them this week. I know we haven't gotten from traffic yet, so
Yeah, so
we're working on those. Yeah.
Just
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Quasi.
All right, anything else?
I don't think so for today.
Okay, so I'll go over the schedule with a caveat. We're doing the concurrent review of preliminary plan and conditional use, so we'll have some discussion about how that proceeds at the end. But just based on the acceptance date for the preliminary plan of November 21st with intake, the first resubmittal will be due December 21st, and your final resubmittal will be due January 15th. Agency letters will be due February the 4th, and the planning board date based on this acceptance date will be March 16th.
May I ask you to send these to us in writing?
I will send it to you in writing as well.
That would be very kind.
No problem at all. Since we are reviewing the conditional use as well, which will need to be before the planning board, before the preliminary plan will be before the planning board, the conditional use will go to the planning board on March 9th or March 16th to give enough time for the hearing examiner to review it on March 31st. So we anticipate a 30-day extension needed for the preliminary plan, so we can have that no later than April 13th with that 30-day extension timeline. And I will follow up with that in writing as we narrow down these dates and get it set on our agendas.
Okay. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, please. Because we only have a short period of time for this, and I want to make sure we do everything we need to do. All right, good morning, everybody. I am Christina Sorrento. I'm the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for Novel Bethesda. Your lead reviewer is Elza Heisemakoy, and he is on with us. He's joining us virtually today. Thank you for bringing up the plan, Elza. The purpose of this meeting is to, really it's the applicant's meeting to ask any questions you have based upon the comments you received. I'll ask Elza and Robert to highlight any of the major issues that we should talk about, and then really turn it over because it's the applicant's meeting. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed. So Elza, I don't know if you want to take it away.
Well, before we get started, we
I
have
will.
a statement to make on behalf of the applicant. We've received your comments, and mainly the planning comments concerning creation of a 0.5 acre civic green. And for the past 5 years, we've been engaged with park and planning to determine whether and if and how a park would go on this block. We filed our first sketch plan, it's 2017. And ever since, we've been working cooperatively with park and planning. And earlier, they had a real estate consultant. We filed a preliminary plan to vest ourselves against changes. And since that, I guess the beginning of the year, we were advised no park would go on this block, even though the Goldberg pieces along Woodmont were, not Woodmont, but Norfolk were in fact acquired, but the acquisition, we were told, was to either use as asset to achieve park goals or to put a park here. Then the decision was made and communicated to us that we could proceed forward with our plans. There would be no park on this block. And then, as you probably know, Park and Planning went to sell the property, and we are in final discussions to purchase the property, Goldberg property, at fair market value. So we wanted to say that our position is we are not going to provide a civic green on this property. We have been following what the request of Park and Planning has been, the negotiations that have been had. So we think that based on the comments, Park and Planning needs to internally discuss this matter. We have done what Park and Planning has asked us to do, and that's the plan that you have there. So what we want to do today is not discuss this. We ask you to internally discuss it, and we will address the other comments so we don't, waste time at the meeting, but we would appreciate you internally figuring this out as far as the contradictory positions that were put in the love. So that's it. And if you want to go on, with other things, we're happy and prepared to do it. Yes, got some questions to clarify.
Well, and I think from our perspective, Barbara, this is the first time we're seeing the whole site as one site, that you, for all the property that you have acquired, which is why we asked you to do a concept plan. So this is our first time at providing you comments. And I'm not going to get into the details of big park versus small P open space, what that might be. We have asked you to show how you can still comply with the master plan, which we would do regardless. We will talk internally with parks so that, moving forward, we're all on the same page. But the purpose of the concept plan was for you to submit something so that we have everything in context. And for you to be able to do that so that we can move ahead with concurrent applications. And that's where we are.
The position, Eris was a little late. I just gave, our position after looking at the comments. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to say.
Robert, my problem, maybe I did not understand for the last 5 years, we've been here. And we've been working with you guys to make it. First plan we gave you had the park we complied with the master plan, we did everything that we had to do. Then the Park Service came back, they said, we don't want no park here. We want to get rid of what we paid $10 million.
Right.
And they agree with us, we buy the park from them, and if they don't want to park there, they want to move the park to the Veterans Park. I guess that's what I understand.
That's one of, that's an option.
Right, that's what they want to do. That's why they're selling this. They own this parcel.
Right.
They own it. Now they want to sell it over there. Maybe I'm confused or I don't understand what's going on. You're paying $10 million for a piece of property. And now you are asking us, or maybe I'm confused again, that we should give you a park. You don't, I don't understand. I'm confused.
Well, again, I don't think we're saying it has to be a big P park, like it's a public park. I think we are asking about how you comply with the master plan. There's open space that you're providing on this concept right here. And I think what the DAP, and keep in mind, there's various groups here providing comments. I think the DAP is already focused on that. Because when you presented something on the property that you controlled before, they had the same question. You know, how are you complying with the sector plan? And I think that question is still there.
Well, the decision of the sector plan Civic Green, as you know, the design guidelines provided all different locations.
I understand that.
The decision was it would not go here. And they would sell the land because they bought it for purposes of having an asset to potentially sell or trade in order to achieve goals, the wider goals of the master plan. So they did not want to participate in using this land for a portion of a park. We did not own the land. We don't own Conley. Nobody still owns Conley.
Yeah.
And we were asked during, after we were told there'd be no park here, we were asked by planning staff to provide a connection, a potential connection for a future possibility of Conley the redeveloping, so there'd be a connection. We did that. This plan does that. And but we still get these comments. You know, provide a 0.5 acre civic green. So from our perspective, we spent 5 years, we looked at every option. Park and Planning had a real estate consultant. We were told no park on this block. And that's what you see. So why are we still getting comments about a park on this block, whether you call it small p or large p? It is still taking a different position than what we have been told.
I don't think it is, Barbara. I mean, you have been, we gave you a number of ideas and a number of alternatives in terms of designs. And that's not necessarily what we're seeing here today. You know, and again, the property ownership and what has been submitted has changed as well. Which is again why we're here at concept plan phase, so that you can submit us something. Well, and you open the conversation, so we're happy to continue that, and I'm happy to continue the discussions with Parks. Parks has told you they don't want this property as a park. That's true, and we have said consistently, you show us how you comply with the master plan and the design guidelines. We have to make those findings, and you have to make those findings as well. So we're still asking you how you do that. The DAP is an independent group, but they're part of the BOS and they're part of they're part of the overlay zone in terms of what was created. They're providing us comments on what they see based on the sector plan. And so we still have to take their comments into consideration and then move ahead with these, you know, with your applications that are coming up.
Well, we spent 5 years to be told no park. Now we're being told pay 10 million plus and provide the park. We had been.
I don't think that's a fair statement. I really don't, because we're not asking you to provide a public park here.
What are you asking?
Open space.
Well, we're going to do that, but we're going to provide it as public open space. It's going to meet the criteria of the zoning ordinance. It's going to provide you with a future connection, provide you with some land along, as we can do, along Norfolk and street concept, but it's not going to be a wide open, big open space that just is the park in another name. So that's what this design does. And that's what we think meets what we've been told. And the master plan provides that the park could go elsewhere and could provide connections. And so at that point, we're just doing what we were told. So let's stop and let's have you talk with you folks and figure out where this thing is going, because on the one hand this, on the other hand this, and then.
Sure, you open the conversation, so I'm
Well,
responding
we gotta-
accordingly.
You know, you're giving us these comments
Sure.
that are, in our view, 180 degrees from what we were told.
And I disagree with that completely,
Okay.
but we will talk internally and, you know, and then we'll have to follow up like we have for the past 5 years.
Yeah, well.
On these discussions.
It's very costly. We've designed and redesigned this project, I don't know, at least probably 5 times. To conclude every piece, to ask for Park and Plan to give us their property, to trade. We've done everything. And we were told, no, not on this block. So you figure it out, but this is what we were told.
I don't completely agree with you, but okay, Barbara, we'll follow up with you.
Being absolutely straightforward and truthful.
Okay.
That's what we were told.
Okay.
And we can, you know, discuss that further and
Sure.
give you the evidence of that.
Sure. Can do that.
Robert, do you remember the original plan we gave you?
I do.
Final original?
I do, and I remember the iterations that involved the condominium piece, and at one point, you know, assumed Connolly, at one point, didn't assume the Union Hardware site. There's been many iterations.
No, I'm talking about the original one that we brought and you guys liked it. Everything was good except park department says no park in the front.
Right.
By the park. We were ready to go and build the building. We were, the last drawings that Ian did for us, it was all done. It was sitting back in our 2 properties. It was not encroaching on any other property. And
I seem to remember it had a land swap on one of those,
we
but,
did
but,
not.
yeah, I mean, there have been many iterations.
Well, and when this is Elza. Hi, everybody. When this project originally came in, the planning department clearly told you that this block wasn't big enough for a development that didn't include the park. So you had your development on the north side, on the property you control. And we said, we can't find, you know, this was Gwen, this was Robert, this was Paul, this was me. We cannot find sector plan conformance without a park on this block. And that's where we landed the very first time. So I think we've been very clear about the importance of the space on this block, as Robert said, for 5 years.
And again, Barbara, we can follow up, and I know that Parks has made it clear they don't need a park here, and they're not asking for that. But we are still asking.
That we're in this state.
This is disappointing. I would agree with you.
Why didn't anybody speak up and tell Parks?
We've been
they were
speaking
wrong?
up for 5 years, Barbara.
Well, not to us.
That's
Because
not,
we've been
that's not the
coming in,
case.
we've been coming in with these plans and you knew we were proceeding.
And this is the first time you've come in with a plan that incorporates the entirety of what you're showing here today.
Because this is the. first
Because you
time-
want to go speed to market and you want to incorporate all 3 concurrent plans. So we said you got to come in with a concept plan that shows us what land you're controlling, how you're going to amend the plan that you originally submitted that hasn't been accepted yet.
Are
So
you prepared to give us that land at no value?
Barbara,
Then we'll do your park. I mean, that's what we said previously, and the decision was no. And we designed and redesigned, came in, we showed.
We even designed the park.
Huh?
We even designed the park.
Yeah, we designed the park.
Ian designed the park.
And you
guys
know what?
liked it.
I'm gonna have to turn it over to Parks on some end because planning doesn't own the building here. Parks owns the building. And this is theirs to sell.
You can't-
And, you know, I walked into this meeting today because we were gonna have, hey, we have comments here today. You open the door to have this conversation. We're having a conversation. And if we need to follow up with Parks in terms of getting back to you.
You can't be told 2 different things.
And okay,
Yeah.
I'm, okay,
Yeah, we're just going over the same ground. If Parks wants to say something, fine, but
sure.
at this point, you need to get your act together.
And I think,
Truly. I mean, I don't mean that.
no, that's disrespectful.
I don't
And-
mean
and
that
I-
disrespectful, but
No, that
if you
is.
were in our position after all this, you would say the same thing. What is going on? And that means getting your act together and speaking with one voice if we're in this position. So that's what we're asking you to do, with respect.
And Robert, don't forget the most important part of this project is 25% MPDUs, maybe more.
Which is
That's
why we
what we're
agreed to go
trying-
concurrently.
That's
Right.
what we're trying to deliver to the people in Bethesda that they really need it. A lot of families don't have place to stay in Bethesda because it's so expensive and so costly. That's what we're pushing.
We understand that. We do.
Thank you.
I mean, the sector plan's equally important to a lot of the people that went through this process, but we completely agree with you, Aris. The affordable housing is a big part of it.
I just want to jump in and say you have 3 minutes left with a concept plan. This is where this plan dies. So this is your
Ian, take
chance
it away.
to, yeah.
All right, good morning. Just a couple statements real quick and then a couple of questions. We filed the preliminary plan with the previous policy, the subdivision staging policy. That was before the GIP went into effect. So there shouldn't be a traffic impact study. We got a comment about 10-foot PUE, and I don't know that I've ever had in downtown Bethesda a 10-foot PUE all around the frontages. We had a question or a comment to try to provide 6-foot refuge between the garage and the loading. And essentially, that just means that curb cut's going to get wider. Just didn't know if anybody picked up on that. Okay.
Thank you.
The truncations, I don't know if Scott, if you've joined the meeting, if you're able to pull that plan up. We did a quick overlay to show, yes, there are 0 truncations on the northwest and the southeast. The northeast is reduced, but it's no different than the extents that it was before. Do you have the revised one that I sent?
This was the one that sent last night, the one this morning.
No, I sent late, just after this one, I sent another version. So I did an overlay that showed the existing buildings on top of our proposal, and essentially the proposal that we have pulls the buildings in from that.
This is the one that.
Really?
715.
Pretty sure I sent it back out. Okay. So we will be happy to share that with staff if you guys want to look at it. In counting open space, as typical, I do show a very large amount, but I report less, and we just reported the minimum of 10%, which is what the zone requires. We had taken another look at it, which was that graphic that Scott just had up, where we had, I think it's about 7 feet from the right of way in on Norfolk. That will give us, with the green that was indicated on that plan, the 2,507 square feet for public open space. We were a little confused on the shared street no longer being on Norfolk. It was mentioned at DAP. Not quite sure where that's written or how we can resolve that, but we know that there's a request for double row of trees and that open view to the west to get to Veterans Park. The forest conservation exemption we know will be needed, and that should be filed shortly. We should have that approved prior to the concurrent submissions of the 3. We also got a comment on the green wall not being very, sustainable in this area. So we are thinking maybe a temporary art against that space on the west side, so that should the Connolly piece redevelop, that could be removed. And like I said, interim. So we would propose a temporary art installation. There was a comment from Grace on the southwest corner of that building. I don't know, Scott, if you can point to that area where we had on the building itself, your building, right up a little bit farther. There was a comment from Grace about activating the first 60 feet. I'm not quite sure what that meant.
That came from the DAP.
Was it from that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we will certainly study for bird safe design for the site plan submission. We have obviously all of the comments that you guys gave us, and we've started to put draft responses together that will come in with the concurrent submissions of the 3, so that you can see how we've responded to the comments we got at sketch or concept.
I guess just one follow-up from what Ian said on Norfolk as a shared street. If it's not a shared street, we'd like to know what exactly type of street it is to be able to properly respond to the guidelines. So we're told now that this section of Norfolk is no longer a shared street per the guidelines. So if it's not a shared street, what type of street is it?
Yeah, the section that we're looking at trying to implement.
Right, so we have separated bike lanes that are planned along there, and it's also still part of the canopy corridor per the design guidelines.
Right, but what typology of street is Norfolk in that segment?
I believe, we'll check the guidelines, but like,
The guidelines have it as a shared street. So that's why we're asking.
Yeah, is it something changed since the master plan?
when we worked on it with Marriott, we ended up making some changes where, because it ties into bike lanes on Cheltenham across the street.
So do you want us to mirror
Well,
that?
we worked on the Marriott site, so I can certainly pull that up and we can
That would be great. Let's
review
talk
what
about
was there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm happy to coordinate with you, outside of this, if you want to talk it through before you submit, so that
Thank you.
everybody's on the same page.
We just need to know what to design to.
Be happy to talk
To
about that.
change how.
Just one question we had, for probably the architects could answer this, on Wisconsin. Are you building to the lot line or not? It's really unclear from the one or two drawings that we've seen.
We're building to the lot line above grade, so the tower portion of the building is at the lot line, but we're set back at grade. And
So
at
the
a,
ground floor is set back. Is that correct?
correct.
The tower comes out, the section doesn't show that condition, so we were kind of confused by that.
Yeah, that's
We'll need to label things clearer so you can see above grade, versus.
No,
at
I
grade.
mean, Ian, the section didn't show that tower coming forward of the ground floor.
Building section.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
there's two conflicting pieces of information. And that's a very important piece of information to know where the ground floor is in relationship to the lot line and what's happening above. So when we go through the resubmittal process, that's going to be a very important piece of correction to be made in your application.
One final question that we had, or comment, was regarding the canopy on 355. That boxed out white area at the main entry for the building is a canopy that reaches out into the right of way, but it is removable, from what I understand from the architect, that it will be designed as a removable canopy. And we're no longer going to be counting public use space underneath that. And now you can kind of see the different corners, and then this L shape that's on the plan today is what we're counting as the 2,507 square feet.
Matt, I see you have your hand up, Matt.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the Norfolk Avenue question. I don't recall what the Bethesda master plan called for, but the more recent master plan that's applicable in this particular case is the bicycle master plan. And the bicycle master plan does classify, or does note, that Norfolk Avenue between Woodmont and Wisconsin is supposed to have separated bike lanes. And that's what, DOT has a project that's looking at, it's not fully funded at this point, but we have a project to look at separated bike lanes on the Norfolk to Cheltenham corridor. There is a development across Wisconsin Avenue that's installing a portion of those separated bike lanes. So we just need to see those on the plans, and there may need to be a fee in lieu, or that this applicant may choose to construct them. I don't know, but that does need to be reflected. And then I also had mentioned in comments that on Woodmont Avenue, the bike master plan calls for separated bike lanes, two-way separated bike lanes. The plan didn't, to my knowledge, specify which side of the street, but it should be the west side of the street, the opposite side of Woodmont Avenue from this site, because we have separated bike lanes on Woodmont Avenue south of Norfolk Avenue that would extend further north.
So just to follow up on that, on the bike lanes along Norfolk, which side of the street is that supposed to be on? Because some comments said both sides, some comments said one
On
side.
Norfolk, it's both sides. On Woodmont, he's talking about is on the west side.
Oh, no, the comments we received did have both direction along Norfolk.
It's on Norfolk, it should be one way, both sides.
Separated.
Separated bike lanes, one way, both sides. Totally.
Right. So cyclists who are going westbound would be in a separated bike lane on the north side of Norfolk Avenue with the westbound traffic, and cyclists going eastbound would be in a separated bike lane on the south side of the street with eastbound traffic. One way, both sides, but there are separated bike lanes on both sides, but they're one directional, just like the roadway is divided in the center line.
And that's what shows on the Marriott. Okay, great, perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And
We may need to talk a little bit about like the separation, because I don't know the Marriott was showing that, but like,
Anything else burning? Because we're way over.
This is Rebecca. I just want to mention that, according to Andrew says it's a downtown street.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Downtown street is,
Norfolk.
Norfolk and Fairmont.
just remember, this is the Bethesda downtown guidelines, so the CSDG don't
Oh,
apply.
And this
We'll
is
work.
Grace. I'm just
Make it
going
clear.
to jump in since this slide's on the screen. In terms of the public open space, the comment was to remove the public open space under any cantilevers. And so if that dashed line is still showing a cantilever on Wisconsin Avenue, we would like that to be removed and focus the open space on the Norfolk side. And I assume that that open space and that deck could be, would be revised based on the DAC comments. And so depending on how it looks when you submit, avoid putting open space under the cantilevers.
So Grace, thank you for bringing that up. I should have mentioned that earlier. And thank you guys again for the time overs we've got. The level above that is 18 feet high. Is that, well, I think in the past we've counted public use space underneath things that are 15 to 18 to 20 feet high, and we haven't had a comment regarding that.
Well, we've had comments, Ian, on that before. But I think that's something that if we need to work through, we can. But we've always made comments about the heights. If you're proposing open space or public use space.
We've always been able to count them within the, that height, 18 to 20 feet. We've usually been able to count them.
Well, it's also tied to what you heard at the DAP about the space being able to be of more like a usable space than just a transitory space.
Sure.
So
No,
it's not, this is a hairball, we need to.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's not a half a foot wide for, 300 feet long. It's.
Let's follow up with Eddie, and I know.
Yeah, I think we have to hard stop now. So thank you, everybody.
We'll get you back our comments, and we'd appreciate you getting back to us on discussion on, so we know.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. And this is the DRC meeting for 9801 Georgia Avenue. Your lead reviewer is Amy Lindsay. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions you might have based upon the comments you received last week. And this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Amy is going to pull up the plan in a second and just highlight some of the major issues we should discuss. And then really this is the applicant's meeting. So take it away, Amy, when you're ready.
One moment, please.
It's gonna stay high.
I'm sorry, this is it, we don't usually have that quick of a turnover. There's usually
We're
some.
good.
stuff.
Sorry, yeah, we thought you were on a clock, so.
We are,
Trying.
we are trying to be on a clock.
Either
yes.
hang out with Eris out there or come in with you guys. So we're gonna come in with you.
All right, so thank you all for joining us. And I just want to say first off, how excited we are to have this plan come in. We're excited to see some change and growth in this area. And we think right next to the metro is a fantastic opportunity to get people living much closer to the metro and being able to use that. That being said, we had a number of comments, all of which we think are issues that we all think are solvable. But, you know, one of our areas of concern has to do with the frontage along Woodland Drive. There's just a lot going on and a lot that has to fit, and we understand that. So that's going to be an area of focus and concern. Another sort of big area of focus for us is master plan compliance. The master plan is very specific down to giving directions on parking, the open space. There are a lot of recommendations in that master plan that we want to try to meet. We understand that there may need to be compromise, but we at least need to be headed in that direction with justification if we can't meet all of them. So the open space, how we treat that entrance to the metro in a way that is appropriate for the context, how the building frames the space, and how we create a really safe pedestrian experience too. So those are some of our major issues, and we're happy to discuss anything with you.
Great. Thank you everyone for being here and for your comments. And I appreciate that intro because we have actually been working on this project with staff for over a year. We actually had our first meeting, Amy, you were part of it, in early December of 2021 because there's so specific recommendations in the sector plan and there's site constraints all over the place between SHA wanting land and having to accommodate stormwater. So we appreciate that this is a difficult nut to crack. And I think as everyone has seen, since we've been having those meetings, the applicant's committed to trying to make those things work. There's some things we're just not, I know the sector plan calls for like childcare on the site. We're just not going to get there. So so we appreciate the goal of substantial compliance and that is what we're going to be working toward as well. We have also had meetings aside from with staff with MCDOT about the tunnel construction. We're coordinating with them and we've had numerous meetings with SHA. It looks like we finally have resolution on there. For those that weren't in those meetings, we're going to accommodate some of their stormwater on site in lieu of them having a greenfields pond, which was their initial proposal. They have dropped an auxiliary lane on northbound Georgia Avenue, but they still want a turn lane on Forest Glen. So we're looking at that, the impacts of that turn lane. We're also looking, there were a number of comments about the complete streets. We're looking at the impacts of those. Woodland we'll get to in a minute, but Graham, did you want to do some introductory remarks as well?
Yeah, listen, we reiterate exactly what you're saying. It's been a year and a half that we've been under contract and longer since we started working on this thing and copious amounts of meetings, not with only you guys, but also
residents and people in the area. Overwhelmingly, there's a lot of support for the project, which is nice to see, and we've sort of been welcomed with open arms as far as the ideas. Some of our thoughts have merit and sort of there's reasons for it, and then there's some thoughts that we can work with and sort of try to work with everybody on. When you see the site, I would say an aerial view, and just once you get there, it seems pretty basic. The more you dig into the site, the more complicated it becomes. And it's one of those sites that Marty works with me and we feel like we're in a video game, because every time there's a problem, you defeat it, and then there's a new boss that you have to defeat. Because it's long and skinny, and that's challenging for architectural point of view, but it's also, it's very narrow, and then we get pinched by power lines, and then the widening of Georgia Ave. The grade is challenging. You probably have about 20 feet of slope in a very short distance. And then Woodland's a very wide street for what it is, and then trying to deal with the neighbors and some of their desires. So it's, as I've met with the neighbors, there's not one solution to it. It's a solution that is going to be brought with a lot of different compromises. And we're here to sort of discuss some of those. Happy to work with people on it and let you know what, there's a lot of thought that's gone into this. This is not just this is our plan, let's move on. This is a year and a half and a lot of money and effort to get to this point. So thanks for your time.
So we thought a good place to start would be on Woodland Drive, and what we have been, that definitely came through in our meetings with the community, that they understood that that wanted to be a greenway. Traffic calming came through loud and clear. So we've been looking at that cross section as well. I think some of the comments were somewhat contradictory about what is wanted there. So I don't know, Mike, did you want to start with what we were thinking?
Well, I mean, we were expecting more of a standard street section or streetscape on that, where it's a 6-foot sidewalk and then a buffer that's more standard. And just looking through the comments, it looked like, I think it was DOT, they were looking for a buffer that was 11 to 14 foot, which seemed excessive and probably a little difficult to implement. I mean, we'd want to provide as much of a buffer as possible, but I don't know that we could achieve that. And then as far as the greenway would be concerned, I think given the width of the pavement there, we didn't know if it would make sense to add some, kind of chicanes from the greenway type of typology, road typology. Given the length that we have here, I don't know that it would make sense to install any kind of speed bumps, because, those really are going to be more effective if they're, more extensive on the road. And we thought the chicanes might help to really help with this project in particular. I think that's most of what we were thinking, other than, of course, the lay-by. I don't know that we need to get it completely figured out at sketch plan, but the lay-by was one of the solutions that we had to the master plan recommendations. And we thought it was a good compromise. But again, trying to figure out the length of it, or if it really is appropriate, that would be something to get a better understanding of. We did put that in there generally as a placeholder, trying to just maximize the length that we could achieve. But if we need to pull it back from Forest Glen, totally understand.
So I think just from my perspective of having, and I hear what you're saying, there's a lot of language and some of it's kind of fighting with each other. The circulation systems, how we have drop off, how we have garage entries, the loading zone, all of that. I think there are some ways that, you outlined the site constraints very well. You've got 20 feet of height distance from Georgia Avenue to Woodland, but I think if you worked with that to help with your circulation system, that there are probably some solutions there that would pull, for example, the drop off into the site instead of having it out on the road where you have more conflicts with pedestrians and
When you
cyclists.
say drop off, are you talking about the lay-by? Or are you talking, what drop off are you
I'm
discussing?
talking about the lay-by because what the master plan actually calls for is a drop off. It doesn't actually say, lay-by. In fact, it points to it being internal to the site.
Appreciated that, but this is also something I mean, we one of the original meetings, we went through this, and one of the things was, taking you through some of the history back to sector plan, and talking with the neighborhood, they actually put that language in to try to placate their neighbors. And some of the neighbors, I've said this and I've told the neighbors to talk to Matt, a lot of them don't want that drop off at all. So I don't know where you guys stand on that, and it's sort of a question. I don't care if the lay-by's there or not. I'd say if you guys don't want it, that's great, we can figure that out. But as far as the community, there's a lot of disagreement if they want that even for drop off for the metro. But as far as putting it in the garage, I thought that was a settled discussion.
Okay, I would say from looking at the site plan that consolidation and working with that frontage to minimize the interactions with, your curb cuts with your pedestrians and cyclists would definitely be our goal. And, I understand that a lot of times when we're talking in early stages, we don't necessarily have a plan in front of us, but I do think that there are ways that, that all of these could be accommodated.
I don't know in those early meetings if we got into the design of the drop off. I think that's where we would handle it is at this stage. So I guess what Amy's trying to say is as long as it's a safely designed drop off and it meets the substantial conformance with the master plan, which calls it a drop off, is that correct?
I don't have it right.
But it doesn't
in front of me, but
specify that it's a
calls it
lay-by.
something like that.
Lay-by
Yes.
has a lot of other design characteristics that typically go with it as a label. But whereas drop-off, I feel like is a little more open in terms of what could happen. And so if the master plan says drop-off, I feel like we could kind of work with whatever that is and design it in a way that's safe, that meets the neighbors' needs. I do remember from the master plan process that through that process, there was a desire to have a drop off, which is why the language is in there. But how that's designed, I think, is what is worked out in this project. So we want to make sure it's designed well and safe. I don't know that, we can figure it out in this meeting, the specific design details, but I think we're open to a safe drop off area that is logical and meets the neighbors' needs.
Mike, what's the curb to curb right now? Because when you drive there, I don't know the exact dimension. I drove there 2 days ago just to see the site because it is a very specific site. There seems to be 2 travel lanes, which are pretty wide, and then there's no parking signs posted all along the back end of the property.
Yeah, I mean, it varies. Closer to Forest Glen, it's actually narrower, more like 24 feet, and then it really grows more substantially as you go north,
Right.
where it's as much as 30 feet, if I remember.
For 2 travel lanes. So there's certainly some space there to be recaptured, whether that gets translated into tree buffers or drop-off spaces or parking spaces. I think from our perspective, and I'm repeating here, but we just want to make sure that the lay-by, the way it's designed, is not having a negative impact on things like street tree placement, buffers for sidewalks that are adjacent to it, and it doesn't conflict with the cars coming in and out of the garage or turning onto Forest Glen, that there's sufficient space there. So that's where our priorities are. And we can work with you all to find a solution. In fact, one of the things I think one of our comments had suggested was could it even be a condition where you consider a more formalized on-street parking on your property frontage, and some of those parking spaces are labeled as drop-off spaces. So it becomes a part of the overall street design in a way that doesn't take away from pedestrian amenities, street trees, bicycle speeds for bicyclists on a greenway, which are very important because they're using shared facilities. They don't have protected facilities. So we can work with you on that. And I think there's asphalt to be reclaimed for some of these uses here. Unless somebody from DOT has some thoughts that they would like to add to the discussion, I think there's some solutions.
Well, when you talked about buffer, you're talking between curb and sidewalk when you said the word buffer?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rebecca, is there anybody in DOT that would like to add to this?
Yeah, this is Deepak here with DOT. Yeah, what Atul mentioned is what we were looking at as well. So if you can move the curb and get some pavement width. Basically, it's not marked, it's not labeled here, so we were not sure how wide the pavement is. That was one of the issues. So unless we see the cross section, it's really hard to figure out what the buffer could be.
I would assume if it's an older street, it's like 26 feet wide. So.
I think one of the section, Mike, you provided showing like a 17 and 17 foot.
Yeah, it definitely varies in width. So
is it a primary residential or is it secondary or? Because it's obviously it's older. It's not a tertiary.
Yeah, I think it's 60 foot right away, so it's a secondary.
Secondary, so most likely it's a 26-foot paving section, and then you could reduce it down to whatever 10 and a half and 10 and a half, I think.
Yeah, that'll provide some natural traffic calming to do that.
One of the wives' tales I've heard in the neighborhood, and I just want to confirm this, is that it was wider and no parking on it for ambulances. Now, that could just be a neighborhood tale. So I just want to make sure we're.
So Marie needs 20 foot.
I'm just.
Yeah, probably Marie needs 20 feet. And as long as you give her 20 feet, she should be good, right, Marie?
Yes, outside of parking. I am not familiar with that wives' tale. It's interesting to hear that. But yeah, as long as you meet minimum codes, you're all right for me.
Okay. And from DOT's perspective, Rebecca, if there was the opportunity to have parallel parking spaces all along the property frontage, in addition to the minimum travel lane widths, in such a way that some of those parking spaces could be reserved for a drop-off situation, is that something that would be a good thing or would give you some pause? Like, can you share your thoughts around that?
It has to be, so it would be signed, no parking. So you can stand or stop. And then I don't know how enforcement would work for the drop off. So I'm not sure exactly what because I know the lay-by is required or requested per the underpass. So I'm not exactly sure we're not familiar with what's going on with that and if that would be acceptable. If you only have 26-foot wide paving, you'd have to widen out the street further to 28, minimum 28 to 29 feet, probably. Yeah. I would say 29 feet.
I think portions of the street today are wider than that already. So it would actually be a narrowing in some parts to get to 29 if we wanted to explore that.
Certainly on-street parking is a traffic calming element.
So are we saying that we'll explore to see if we can provide on-street parking? And if not, then we would want to make sure there's adequate buffer of at least 6 feet between the sidewalk and the curb?
We would expect the buffer to be there with parking. Parking doesn't replace the buffer.
Right, right. So if there's not enough room, then the buffer would grow to be larger. But if forcing the parking in would reduce the buffer to be less than 6 feet, then we don't have parking.
Something along those lines of what you described.
Ideally, in an ideal situation, and if there's a way you can make it work mathematically, you'd have the buffer and the parking, because the parking is going to slow cars down, and it's also going to allow you that drop-off lane that we were speaking of, and the tree buffer will do all sorts of other good things. So that
I
would be
think
the best.
trying to summarize or what Mike's saying is basically it pinches down at Forest Glen. We probably can't do parallel parking and the buffer and everything else, but there's where it widens, you can probably get extra grass in certain spots and then extra parking in others, and we'll just play with it and it'll look like a jigsaw puzzle of some sort.
Yeah, the one concern we had just looking at this drawing, and it's very preliminary, was there are like 5 trees on Woodland. And so we want to make sure that this reads and feels as a residential street with a residential feel, which requires a certain type of a streetscape in addition to all the massing suggestions that we had. So that's going to be our primary focus, is to make sure that Woodland feels like a safe residential street. It has a building that kind of responds to the houses across, and it has a streetscape that allows the cyclists to use shared facilities in a safe way because everybody's going slow, and the pedestrians have adequate facilities to walk back and forth and around the site. That's our high level goal.
And we will take a crack at that. I get you guys. So one of the questions we had on the garage loading and trash on our Georgetown project, they wanted a pedestrian safety refuge in between that stuff. So we took that knowledge and tried to extrapolate it over here, which according to the comments is not what we should have done. So what I'm trying to figure out is, do you want that all ganged together with the loading, trash, and garage? Or do you want a pedestrian refuge like we have in between? So as you're walking, you sort of hit there, you can wait, or you're not doing straight across. I mean, that's.
I think the goal is to like make that area as narrow as possible. Like we couldn't quite understand why you have 3 curb cuts. We know like one is for loading.
Trash, loading, and then garage entrance. And
So is there any way that the trash and loading can get consolidated, or the drive into the parking can be like reduced as narrow as possible? Because it looks like that's more than 60, 70 feet wide for pedestrian to cross from sidewalk, walking through those drive and then get to the other side sidewalk. And then the sidewalk needs to be like continuous to create a safer crossing for pedestrians.
So, I mean, we can look at that. I'm not saying no. So, but I guess my question is, as we look at that, you're gonna have some breaks in there. Do you want, is there a minimum width you want for pedestrian safety? So I think, what is that, 10, Mike?
10, yeah.
So we did driveway 10, driveway 10, driveway. Is there, do you want us to narrow that down, or do you want us to leave 10 and just try to figure, I mean, we'll look at the width of that?
If we need pedestrian refuge, 10 feet is a good dimension because it gives you the space to stand and wait. We weren't sure whether we needed 2 pedestrian refuges or just 1. And we were also not sure whether there was a way to combine trash and loading into a more tight area and then have the garage entrance be as tight as possible. And then maybe have 1 refuge between the 2, because partially what the refuges do too is they take away from your ability to plant street trees along the curb. You know, case in point, the tree is not along the curb anymore, so the sidewalk is unprotected then. And as a design feature, we would expect the sidewalk to continue at the same elevation across all these curb cuts.
Yeah.
And everything else is sloping up or down from it.
If this curb to curb, if you consolidate some of the uses, so curb on one services to the curb of the parking, let's say, on the other, you know, if we're talking 20 to 25, 26 feet, I don't think you even need a refuge in the middle of that. That's narrow. That's narrower, and that's what we're looking for, is the narrowest possible.
Yeah, I would like to add to that as well. Basically, the where the refuge island is shown with the tree, if you can take that out and consolidate, basically reduce that width for the garage entry and make the loading separate, I mean, with the refuge island.
I would agree. Right now it reads as a pedestrian is walking through a vehicular space instead of a vehicle driving through a pedestrian space.
It's a 2-way in and out to the garage there, right? So that's what, 20 feet minimum?
24.
And 24?
Yeah.
I think that's what Rebecca will tell me.
Is that right, Deepak? Like you want 24 for the garage?
Yeah, 24 for the garage, and then there should be detail in there. So I mean, they can look at the commercial driveway detail. So it seems like it's 24, and then have a refuge island, and then put the loading
Okay.
on the other side of the refuge.
So that would, I think, give you some guidance. Okay.
Okay, then I guess the next thing we wanted to hit was open space. So I know, Amy, you had a number of comments about the open space plan. One thing I realized when we went back and looked at it was we are actually calculating the open space on the gross tract, and it needs to be on net tract. So I think some of the more objectionable areas can come out just because the calculation is going to be different.
That may be true, but I think the sort of big picture, I mean, I know I mark up the plans a lot. That's just trying to be thorough. But I think the bigger picture point is that this open space to the north is not going to be a comfortable space, nor will it be used as public open space. We would rather see one really great plaza at the southern end. You know, I would even venture to say that heads into the unsafe realm of things, because there aren't a lot of eyes on it, and it won't have a lot of sunlight through it because it's a north facing. So you're not going to get a lot of sun in there. It's going to be kind of dark, and sure, there are windows looking out onto it, but it's kind of isolated from a pedestrian standpoint. So from an open space standpoint, I understand the master plan, sector plan has language about the size of it. So if that's not achievable, then we need to have a really good explanation of why. And we need to do the best we can and have it consolidated really in one area. The whole change in open space quantity between the two zoning ordinances, it used to be much higher, was to make certain that the open space that we did have was consolidated and was really very public and usable. So just making certain that the pedestrian connection really works and is well lit and attractive, maybe with benches, things like that. I think the incentive guidelines actually have some guidance in there because you are using that for points. Yeah. And then having the open space over by the metro area be designed in such a way that it's public, usable, and appropriate for the scale and location.
And obviously some of those details, benches, lighting,
Understood.
the area, so we couldn't really sell it. But on the north side, but we're okay with the through block, because that's why I thought that space, you know, it's connected to the through block connection.
It is, but I don't see it ever being used. I mean, for what I said, it's almost like it's internal. I wouldn't even read that as public space if I was walking past, because it's surrounded on three sides by a private residential building. And so it would not even read as public. And then the fact that it's not going to get a lot of sunlight. There's no access into the building. There's nothing that activates it. I think it's just, it sets up a problematic situation. And we think the project would be much stronger to have the open space be, you know, focused in the one location.
The building may have an entry point there.
So, you know, picture's worth 1,000 words here. So what, you know, and we are learning as we approve projects, and then we go back and see, okay, how did this really turn out? Is it being used or not? What we don't want this to be is to become something like the through block connection north of this Ava building. Just half a mile north, you can go and see it's exactly the same condition. It's on Georgia. There's a lot of grade, so there's steps in it. So it's not really ADA accessible either. And it's very private and north. I mean, you really need to know that it goes where it goes to even venture into it. It feels like, oh, there might be some very private units there or something like that. So I think what happens at both ends of the street for the through block connection, so that the entrances of these are clearly marked and appear as public, so that the public knows they can go there and use them, is important. I think a lot of Amy's comments about having reasons to be there beyond just the through block connection are important. So you need to think about what's in the space, what's fronting the space, what's along the space, so that it reads like a public open space is really, really important. And the hierarchy overall is critical. So this space is a secondary space. The space along Forest Glen and Georgia is the primary space. So it should, that's where put a lot of effort to make that really fantastic. And this can be a more connective space and is designed in a manner that is safe and attractive and very obvious that there's a pedestrian connection that goes across the site. That's kind of our, I hope I added to your thoughts there correctly.
Yeah, that is really the direction where you're going, because you also want the residents to feel safe, and there's just like not a lot of visibility into this space, so.
And I think that feeds into a comment that came up about ground level entrances, which we're going to look at. Obviously, again, there's a lot of things going on with stormwater and grading, but I think they're going to look at adding those where we can, where it's feasible to do so.
Yeah, any active like ground floor will help activate that open space along the edge. So secondary lobby or the units that they have individual way into the.
And along the streets too, I think our
Yeah.
comments
Yeah, I think
included.
Yeah, we took it to mean all sides of the building.
That'll help with the scale issue along Woodland.
Woodland as well.
It's really, this building extends 2.5 blocks essentially of Woodland. And so that's a lot of where our concern is, that both between, building articulation and bringing the scale down, so that we know you guys have done a good job with the vertical scale and, making certain it meets compatibility that way, but also on a horizontal, because it's so long, making certain it meets that.
Did you want to briefly touch on the problems with going vertical to add articulation? And I know we talked about that before. Yeah, just generally. So that was one of the things that we.
Two things. One, we hear you loud and clear on the facade of this building and how long it is and how to break it up. And I will say that not everybody may have picked up on this. We've actually switched architects. We brought Moya in, Fede over here. We dropped 12. So a lot of the stuff that was getting back, scale-wise, structural-wise, we were not happy. So Fede worked with us on a deal over in Twin Brook with SK&I. He's worked with us in the past, and I trust him to make this better. So that was the first thing.
That's all I know.
So Fede, don't screw up. Second thing, so business model-wise and just sort of plan, and I like to start my meetings, and this is not for you guys, but just on what we're trying to accomplish. And what we're trying to accomplish here, we have to have a wrap as far as a structured parking and a wood frame building. Financially, it just doesn't work. So what we're trying to do is stay in wood frame as much as possible because of the high side of Georgia Ave. We can do one level of podium and that's it. Otherwise, you're measuring fire off of the backside and you get forced into high-rise code real quickly. So we got to stay 6 stories on the front, and then the backside picks up the rest. So to try to maximize the density here without going high-rise, which financially would kill this project, you got to stay 6 stories on the front side and lower on the back. So looking at that, those are 2 constraints that we hit code-wise and financially just right away. So we've looked at trying to do 7 stories, and because of where we have to measure our grade, we off of the backside, we can't do 7 stories up front. So one of the things we heard loud and clear early on was maximize the density as much as possible. We want density on this site. So to do that, we got to try to hit as much density as we can and look at woodland and all over the place to try to pick that up. And because of how the building falls, it gets, like I said in the beginning, it gets complicated fast. So I hear you on woodland. I think that architecturally, a lot of it's important on how FedA covers it up. The other thing is we have this garage that sort of sits there that looms, right? So we're trying, and one of the things we talked to the neighbors about is trying to cover that up as much as possible. So you have this garage that sits here. If we're doing 3 or 4 stories, you have this butt end. So how do we cover that? How do we, and looking at the law and the code, you have certain height and then you start going back 45 degrees. So that step back becomes important to help hide in that garage. And these are the things we're playing with. We don't have it perfectly done. I'm not saying that our plan is perfect, and if we're looking at how to do those units and trying to lay out those 45-degree angle units, and they're tough. So I don't think woodland's done by any means, and then we're willing to work with you guys, but those are some of the constraints that we're dealing with on this site.
Yeah, go ahead. I just want to point out to one of the Paul's idea of like, I think like the idea that you have that you are trying to cover up the garage, it's becoming like challenging for this part parcel. So one sketch that we did and included into the upload there, it's extending the garage in a lower level, but extending it to the entire site. So I don't know if I can share.
We only have a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
Require a podium, which is a casting.
Financially, you can't. I mean, no, I
Well, I know there's a balancing act, I think, on all of this, obviously. There's a lot of things. I mean, most, or at least half, if not more than half of your building is single loaded corridors. So I think there's an inefficiency there as well. So I think, I mean, you have to figure out where you could put money and where you get the most value out of that money. And so that was why we had suggested the other, because what that does is just turns everything into double loaded corridors, which I think is more efficient, and it allows potentially, the breakup of the mass along Woodland Drive, which I think is a really big problem. Because right now I think you're over 550 feet of length. And so even, if you just have a 2-foot, 3-foot base sticking out, or you just have a different color of material or whatever, it's not enough, right? Because you're still seeing the mass. So that needs to be addressed somehow. So I think you've heard.
Did you guys get our sketches just as starting point? Okay, just want to make sure.
So we've got to wrap up now, so I want to make certain, I mean, we've got a lot more to talk about, and I'm happy to schedule any follow-up meetings. I did want to go over real quick the schedule. Our first resubmittal date is the 16th, with a final submittal date on the 26th of December. It's a very tight schedule to make it to the planning board on February 9th. So I just want to make certain that's out there. I can pass over copies of this. Another thing that might have gotten lost in the volume of comments just has to do with the number of parking spaces. You're over the maximum, and if you.
I thought we were I didn't think we were over the maximum. We're close to the maximum, but I don't think we were over. I double checked that.
Over the max.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes during sketch plan, we start fluffing numbers and stuff like that.
I
So
understand.
Our intent was to be at the max.
Well, I just want to put this out there that if you're over the max, you actually have to go for a variance.
Right.
And notice that, so that just wanted.
We won't be over.
Put that
I
out
promise
there.
you that.
Thank you. Yep.
And I would also point out that this sector plan has very specific recommendations on parking.
And this is
So-
literally on the metro. I mean, you can't get any closer to a metro station than this site. You can have a tunnel at your front door that'll take you to the station. So we would strongly suggest that you should minimize your parking as much as you can. I didn't pick up on this, that you were close to the maximum. I'm really surprised, Graham. What's the incentive? I mean, every parking space is money for you too.
Yeah, but if you have 415 units, where are they getting their groceries? How are they doing? Unfortunately, Forest Glen is an island right now, and it might change in 10 years, but right now there's nothing there. There's a metro, there's Holy Cross, and there's residential. There's no place to get coffee, Well, trying to change that, there's no place to get anything. What I don't want to do is limit my renter pool because we don't have enough parking.
We understand that, but also, we also understand that most of these units will be one-person units. I mean, you might have two-bedroom units, but most of it will be mostly one-person units. And one more stop up the metro line is, you're, right under the probably the largest Safeway we have in the county. So again, I think we hope that you consider as few parking spaces as possible and just whatever is reasonable. But I think, this is an ideal space for people who don't have a car to live because they can hop right on a train.
And no offense to that statement, we did one over in Twin Brook and we parked it at 1-4 and it was full. And Twin Brook has a Safeway across the street. It has the metro right on top of there. So, and Montgomery County is forward thinking on this, and I give you guys credit on that. In Fairfax, we're at 1.516 on top of the metro. And we're trying to balance all of that right now in the data we're getting from our projects.
So the thing is that you can, residents, if they have a car, don't have space to park, they will flood the neighborhood. It's not gonna go well with the neighbors.
It's also a neighborhood problem of making sure we have enough parking, and then one of their major comments has been, make sure you're parked. Yeah.
So we need to wrap up, but what I want to ask is, do you have all the information you need to make your resubmittal? Or do you need to have a follow-up meeting? Because we have the work session.
Schedule it, and then if we can wrap things.
Yeah,
up.
if we can get one on the books, that would be good. I mean,
We
it's
have
going to be a race to see how much we can get done this week to make that meeting productive, but.
Okay, so you would like to be on for the work session next week?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. What issues would you want to discuss? Because I need to know who needs to be in the meeting.
Woodlands, right?
Yeah.
So DOT.
Can we brainstorm after and just email you with the?
Yes, but I need to know by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
It
you
doesn't
all.
mean we can't continue working, it's just for that.
Understood.
The placeholder that we have.
Yeah, that's a great.
Which I
idea.
love.
Yeah.
That's awesome. My gosh, thank you.
Yes, we're happy to be the first ones to be able to do that.
That Eris first. Eris is always first.
Eris doesn't get to go because this is a concept. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all very much.
Today's been, everybody's in person. It's been wonderful. Okay, so this is the DRC meeting for Larson Property. I'm Christina Sorrento. I'm the chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division. Your lead reviewer is actually Alex, but she is out today. So Jonathan Casey is standing in for her. I'm going to ask Jonathan to highlight any of the major issues that he might be aware of. And then really this is your meeting to ask any questions you might have. Sure. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So go ahead, Jonathan.
I am aware of most of the issues on this plan because I've reviewed the concept. So the applicant proposing 2 flag lots and 1 lot without frontage, all of which require additional findings to be made by the board. Those are outlined in the subregs. And I think the applicant's going to want to discuss that a little bit in more detail. But Mary Jo, the environmental reviewer, did provide some comments on the forest conservation areas in the back. I think those are pretty straightforward. Yeah. But if you have any specific questions, she's available. So I'll leave it up to you.
I think the forest conservation is straightforward. I think all of the comments are pretty straightforward. There's 2 concerns that we have on there. I'm not sure if WSSC is on. Oh. Hi, WSSC. Had a question. Is comment 40 on the, no, I'm sorry, it's not comment 40. That's test pitting the properties. Comment 45. Issues regarding the fire hydrant on the property. So we have a fire marshal issue that we have a common drive. And because we have the common drive, we have to put the fire hydrant on site. Because of the distance from the existing fire hydrant, we had to pull the water line in, put a fire hydrant on the corner. Our idea was that that fire hydrant will be private. Mm-hmm. And that there would be, the way we have it right now is we have 2 water lines coming onto the property, one going to lot 1, one going to the hydrant, and then from the hydrant to lot 2. So the hydrant will be in line. So it'd be an 8-inch line coming from the main out in the road, coming to the hydrant, and from the hydrant to the house. The way that we could split it behind the fire hydrant to the 2 houses. I don't know what WSSC wants to see, but the idea is that this is going to be private. So I think that might put the concern to rest regarding the easement and public.
Because this is what the reviewer is asking you.
Right.
Because it was not clear in the plans. If the fire hydrant will be public, then we need ice.
Okay, okay.
If it's a private, then.
Always intended to be private. So, okay, all right. So I think that we can resolve that comment pretty easily. Then it goes to comments 58 and 59 that we have, which goes to the findings for the lot without frontage, which is the existing lot. On the right, I guess the east that we have right there is the existing house where the owners currently reside. Looking at splitting this into the 3 lots like what we have shown. The property right now is landlocked as it is. There is a portion of property, the pipe stem itself is under a different, it's a different property. And Kim, did you purchase that or was that done before you?
It was done a few months before we bought it.
It was done before. So we do have 2 separate properties here. I understand we have 50 feet of frontage technically through that pipe stem, which is how we're looking at addressing the 2 new lots. But Kim's house right now, the easement is the one that we were planning to use for it. It's the existing driveway. We really did not want to change anything to do with that existing house right now. So I guess what I was trying to understand on here is it looks like the subdivision that the reviewer is saying to abandon that easement, abandon that driveway, and to make the connection from the 2 flag lots that we have right now. The way we were reading the zoning is like we're allowed to have 2 lots that do not have frontage. So I'd like to understand a little bit more about that, and we would, like I said, we'd like to continue with what we have.
So here's the language I just highlighted.
I cannot read that.
Yeah. So, lots to abut on a public or private road. All new lots must abut on a public or private road.
Yeah.
But the issue here is the provision says all lots will be served by a private driveway that serves no other lots without frontage. When you're creating a lot without frontage. So there's, hypothetically, you could extend that driveway, your new proposed driveway, from the existing, or from the 2 new lots over to serve the existing house. I understand that is not exactly what you'd like to do. I think there might be a possibility to keep the existing driveway.
I guess that's what, right, that's what I wanted to talk about is.
So our recommendation was to consolidate access for the 3 lots that you're proposing with this subdivision all on one access point, which is the one that you're now proposing, with the flag lots for access. So that's one comment. And then the separate comment had to do with a lot without frontage and the justification for that finding. So that's a separate issue.
Right.
And we were asking you to elaborate on those reasons for that finding to be made at the board. So there's a few reasons that you can use. I think topography, environmental, and then the last one, I think, is the location of the lot in relationship to the surroundings.
Is that for justification to extend the driveway or justification to use the existing driveway?
I think as a team, Sandra, actually, I think as a team, we should discuss that first a little more. I think it's an issue that we need to resolve with the code and what you're proposing.
Okay.
Because if we just jump straight to that interpretation.
About the driveway.
About
the driveway.
Other way we have to do a justification. I understand that part. I guess my concern is, can we use the existing driveway or do we have to extend?
Yeah, there's an existing drive. I just think there's a question there that I think we as a team, I totally get the issue and understand it's flagged and we'll have to, respond to that. I just think there are implications for interpreting it that way that lead to additional pavement and turnarounds and imperviousness. And there's some other things that maybe we want to think about before we say you must do this. So I think we as well, we've identified the issue. I think we need to talk first and let's make sure we have a recommendation on how to move that piece forward.
Okay.
And just a comment on, Jonathan, you talked about a driveway that doesn't have any other lot that doesn't have frontage. And I guess it's the question of the interpretation of that. I mean, there's an exclusion possibility if there's only 2 houses on the driveway, or 2 lots can be created that are on that driveway that do not have frontage, right? If proper things are shown.
Not for lots without frontage. So you've got 2 lots without frontage are in a kind of a whole separate category than just 2 standard lots or even pipe stems. You can share the driveways, but you certainly couldn't create 2 lots without frontage sharing a driveway.
I mean, we're talking about, I guess, creating one.
Yeah.
And then there's another lot without frontage on that driveway. So the question is, there's 2 when the dust clears, right?
And you're only creating one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I think we're in the gray area.
Yeah.
About what the intent of this language actually was. And I don't think we're really we can't give you a concrete answer as to our interpretation at this moment.
Where you stand
at the
minute.
something.
Okay.
once we reconvene and probably talk to our legal counsel.
Okay. Is this where we exercise next Tuesday?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you think you guys can get together
Yeah,
and talk?
no, I think this is a
Yeah.
quick conversation.
Okay.
I just think we need to get just a little bit more organized, so, our lead reviewer is out sick, obviously.
Sure,
so it's
sure.
Jonathan stepping in, and we have this comment, and I think we just need to talk as a team and really make sure we give some clear direction on what to do based on the language in the code, so.
Okay. All right.
Apologies, we don't have it right here, but it should.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe a day or two, and we'll.
Okay, I don't think that's the problem. I think that's really what we came down.
The second part of your original question about justifying the lot without frontage, because that was kind of tied into that same comment, separate from the driveway issue. I believe what she's looking for is just provide additional explanation as to why the lot without frontage is justified.
Yeah.
Relation to the tract.
I guess what I was saying is if staff said that we could potentially use the existing driveway that's out there right now, we would still have to do a justification for a land. Either way, we have to do that justification. Is what I was saying. So it really comes down to which way do we go with the driveway? And it looks like, if I read correctly, that we do have support for the flag lots in there. I didn't read anything that says further justification for flag lots, so it sounds like it's just the.
Do you meet the 80-foot requirement for building envelope?
We do. So we showed that. That's actually, that got me back to some of the environmentals. So there's lot width issues and there's setback issues for some of Mary Jo's comments of sliding the house forward too. So again, I can address that, but there is reasons why the houses are setback where they are. So we do meet all, I believe we meet everything else that's required, so.
We
That
looked
was
at
my
that.
next question. I assumed it was addressed if we didn't raise it as an issue. Was
Yeah.
that-
We looked at it after
Setbacks
the
of
concept.
Okay.
Yeah, so, okay. I think that's really what we came down for, so.
Just curious as to like justifying those, the unique, topography and everything that justifies the exemption. We spelled out some of those, I know, in the application. Are there some other areas that should be expanded or that would?
I can read it over a little bit, but I want to talk to Alex to see what she thought was really missing, because I'm good, but I don't read minds. So.
Okay.
Sure she can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yep. So do we set up the meeting for next Tuesday, or do you get back to us on that?
I'll get back to you, and then if by chance the team gets back to you sooner and you don't need that meeting, then we can always cancel it, but let's set it up.
Okay, and then as far as the dreaded exemptions, but extensions, all that kind of stuff, do we need to start already looking at that?
I don't have their calendar, but
okay.
Can I have the calendar? Just a second.
And I'm
Is there other significant issues we think are going to be? Are there other significant issues that we think that'll be necessary?
That was really the big one. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I don't think we need an extension at this point, I hope. Well, what are you thinking?
we have to get all of his approval.
When do they have to resubmit?
They have to resubmit.
We definitely have to resubmit. We're gonna have to, I'm assuming we're gonna have to go to the board for this because of just the flag lots and that, so. I would think that we probably would have to file one extension.
So
I don't have a lot of data points on this scenario with our new board yet. But I would think that if we were coming so early, I don't know that, I think that could probably, well, it could result in maybe a bad discussion with them. But why are you coming now? You still have how many days left? And I don't know.
The first one's a director learning.
Yeah.
Oh.
As long as it's 30 days though, correct?
Yeah.
As long as we're
You're
just doing
thinking
30.
longer than 30?
Let me go back to these comments. Let me hear from you guys.
If we have
It
to go to
depends
the
on
board,
where-
if it's more than 30, then I would rather wait until we think we actually need it and then.
If you tell us that we have to extend that driveway, I'm gonna need more time.
Okay. Okay.
Otherwise, we might be able to make it. I'll have to
Okay,
go
well,
back.
let's check back on that in a week.
What's the resubmittal time?
So for the first resubmittal is December 20th.
2 weeks, I think.
And then the final resubmittal, which is 65 days in advance, would be January 9th.
65 days.
So we could do,
So the final would be January 9th. If it's as simple as it sounds like, maybe you just need one resubmittal. You don't need two resubmittals. So I think that's what you can play out once you see all the comments.
yeah,
Gauge how much time you're gonna need to make revisions. It could be that you just need one resubmittal.
could be. Yeah. All right. I'll go back and look at this. Yeah. I think once we hear back on the position of staff on that driveway, then I'll have the idea. So, okay. So the initial. Final. All right. I think that's.
How about fire department access? Where are we on that?
It was approved. We uploaded the approved drawing.
Okay, so what?
I don't know why she said it was not right.
Sorry, so
What?
Where is she? Oh my gosh, she's behind me. She's everywhere.
I'm watching you.
I hear that. Oh my gosh, it's like you came out of nowhere. We upload the approved. I think the comment was incomplete is what it said on there.
Right.
Which I'm not sure. I have to go back. If this is what I was trying to say. I need to go back and look at why it said that.
Let's ask Marie. She's here. Marie?
So anytime I deal with plans that come through the DRC after I have approved them, I tend to mark them as incomplete just to leave that opening in case something comes out of the DRC process that needs to change it. If it doesn't, the approval stands, life is good.
Ah, gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
You scared me. Like right
How about from behind the curtain, Marie?
Yeah, I think that covers us. I think we meet
Okay.
everything else. So unless you had any other comments,
No, I don't. No, thank you.
so we'll look to hear back from you guys.
Transportation, you're also, it also made sense, the comments we had, I think.
Oh, transportation.
We needed a sidewalk, I believe, on that little portion.
On the 50-foot, yeah, that blows. Yeah,
Is that?
that's fine. Oh, yeah.
I just wanted to check with the team. That's the comment we had, right? Do you?
It is to show the sidewalk in front of the pipe stem.
Yes, I think that's what I heard.
All 50 feet. Yeah, I mean, in most cases, we'll show that and then request the waiver later, if I remember correctly.
Seems to be, yeah. Seems to be
that course of action. Yeah, I mean, it's whatever you, yeah, I mean, because there's no sidewalk anywhere out there, but.
Understand.
Yeah, okay, yep. I think that's all the stuff.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you, guys.
much.
Appreciate it.
Good afternoon now. I am Christina Sorrento, and I am the Chief of the Intake and Regulatory Coordination Division, and this is the DRC meeting for the Hasnain residents. Your lead reviewer is Philip Estes, and he's bringing up the plan now. The purpose of this meeting is for the applicant to ask any questions about the comments you received last week. And I'll just let Philip highlight any of the major issues we should discuss and really just turn it over to the applicant. Philip?
Okay. So I had a plan up on the screen. So this is a concept plan application for a one-lot subdivision for single-family residents. As Christina mentioned, this is an opportunity for the applicant to review comments with members of the DRC. The applicant has received the comments, and I just would like to highlight some of the major issues that were presented. The first one is the impervious surface units into the Upper Paint Branch Special Protection Overlay Zone, which is.
Bill, I'm sorry, you have the existing conditions up. Do you want to put the subdivision up? Sorry to interrupt.
This one, yes, sorry. Okay. So we have some comments regarding the impervious surface limits, other comments regarding compliance with the forest conservation law, some transportation comments, notably the provision to provide a 10-foot side path on the south side of 198, which is Spencerville Road, and also compliance with fire and rescue access. So those are the substantive issues raised, and we can jump into questions from the applicant, or we could go around with a recap of agency comments. It's up to the applicant. What you would like to do.
No, I think we received the comments, and we good, like we are in process of addressing the comments.
Okay, do you have any questions for us?
Not really.
Okay, do you understand the major issues that were provided to you? Do you have any comments about being able to comply with those standards or comments?
No, I mean, so the comment is about adding a sidewalk there, or?
Okay,
all of the comments.
Okay, well, let's just go through. I guess we can just go through and highlight comments. We could start with how about we start with environmental, the impervious surface limits. So do you have any, do you want to highlight those, Doug, or do you have any questions about those?
Well, this is Doug Johnson, the environmental reviewer. As you know, you're under an 8% cap for this development.
Right.
Currently, with just the house and driveway shown, you're at 9%. What the plan is not showing are frontage improvements along Spencerville or Vitch Lane. Those will also have to be added into the impervious amount. So it's going to be a challenge to drop below that 8% cap. The other sort of, not a major comment, but what you will also have to do when you solidify the ultimate limit of disturbance, you will have to get a new forest conservation exemption
for
this property.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah, because the LOD will be revised, so yeah, I understand that. That's fine.
Okay.
We can resubmit the application. And what you're talking about adding the impervious area along the frontage improvement, that means you are talking about just a driveway apron?
any frontage improvements that are required along Beach Lane or Spencerville Road will have to be added into the overall imperviousness. And right now, the plan's not showing any frontage improvements.
Right, yeah, because we did not know, we did not have the comments before about the frontage improvement. That's why it was submitted the way it is. But also when I had the pre-application meeting, that time I was told that if there is any frontage improvement, that we can consider that impervious area, but also we can like the LOD will be higher too, limits of disturbance. So that the percentage below it, I don't know exactly yet, but we understand that. That's fine.
Okay.
So if it is not less than 8%, then we will figure it out the other way to bring the down impervious area down to 8%.
And if this development application moves forward, I would like to make you aware that this will have to go to the planning board because there is a water quality plan involved.
Correct.
So expect that and factor that into your timeline.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean that was discussed in the pre-application meeting also, so we understand that.
Okay.
While we are on this topic, we also have our transportation planner here, Brown Brett, and he can go over the frontage improvements that we are recommending as part of this application, just to make everybody aware. Can you jump in?
So as Sandra said, Brett Brown, Up County Transportation. So a lot of the comments I had were mostly related to exemptions for frontage improvements currently.
Right, yeah.
You are located within a rural zone according to the county road code map, so you would be exempt from providing a sidewalk. I know, I'm not sure if SHA is on the line. I know they are convening a study that would actually add I believe it was a 10-foot side path, but it would be on the southern end, so the eastbound lanes of Spencerville Road, so on the other side rather than on the side where the property fronts Spencerville Road. So in terms of that, just kind of harkening back to any kind of impervious caps, you like I said, you'd basically be exempt from providing any frontage improvements that might increase the impervious cap.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brett. And I think the other outstanding issue was fire and rescue access. Did you have any questions about those comments?
No, I didn't see any comments on the fire rescue side.
Okay, but I think we do have Marie on the line. Marie, would you highlight your comments for the applicant?
The big thing on this was that you need to locate a fire hydrant within 400 feet of your driveway. I did not see one on the plan.
Right now it may not be on the plan. I don't know exactly, but we might send the surveyor out to shoot the fire hydrant if it is within 400 linear feet. But we can double check and resubmit the plan.
Perfect.
And we will address that comment.
When you locate the hydrant and redevelop the plan, you'll want to email that to me directly for a faster review.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are there any other comments or questions from the applicant?
No, I mean, I had the major thing about, I saw the comment about that impervious surface. And right now, I mean, it seems like there is no frontage improvement is required. So other areas we have already included within the LOD. So right now I'm still within the limit of 8%.
This is Doug again. You are over 8% by my calculations. You are at 9%. And you're not showing the ultimate impervious surface for this property. One of my comments on the plan was to have an accurate layout of the house, including any lead walks, patios, et cetera, that are typical with homes. That would increase your imperviousness. But even as shown right now, you're at 9%.
I mean, the way we measure it, it came out by 7.87%. But I will double check, and if it is
Okay.
required, then we will, as I say, that we can make any adjustment if requires the reducing the footprint of the house or whatever, then we will take the action then.
Good.
Okay, but yeah, I will keep it down to 8%.
Okay, so if you have no further questions or comments, the next step is if you wish to pursue this would be to address those comments, and then we'd need to file for a preliminary plan application. Okay?
Okay,
And reach out if you have any other questions.
sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.